On this episode of the SSI Executive Conversations podcast, Darwin sits down with Cody Simmons, CEO and founder of DermaSensor, a company revolutionizing skincare treatment by creating a handheld device to easily and quickly identify skin cancer. Darwin and Cody discuss the insights into DermaSensor, as well as talking about leadership, raising capital, and entrepreneurship in the post-COVID era.
Well, I'm incredibly excited to welcome Cody Simmons to the SSI Executive Conversations podcast. Cody's the CEO of DermaSensor, which is a healthcare company that raised $27 million and is in the process of launching the world's first point-and-click skin cancer detection for primary care providers. As a bioengineer and really a serial entrepreneur, he spent all of his career bringing new health technologies to physicians and patients. He's a frequent speaker at health technology and entrepreneurship events. Prior to joining DermaSensors, Cody led all commercial efforts for Silicon Valley medical device screening and monitoring at a startup there. He began his career in business development and commercial strategy at Genentech. Bachelor's of Arts degree in economics, as well as entrepreneurship in the bioengineering track from Brown University. And he received his master's degree in bioengineering, for which he completed his graduate research at Stanford University. Also, pretty exciting that he was included on the Forbes 30 under 30 in healthcare. So Cody, welcome to the podcast. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you.
Darwin, thanks so much for the introduction, and very, very excited here as well. Appreciate you guys having me. And the Forbes thing, I don't know the statute of limitations on that. It's a few years old at this point, but I guess still fair enough to bring up. Yeah,
still pretty exciting, you know. Well, DermaSensor, I think, has an opportunity to bring a tremendous amount of value to the marketplace for skin cancer patients. So maybe you can kind of start us off by talking about what the product does first.
sure, happy to, and maybe I'll spend a minute on kind of skin cancer first, and sort of the
Yes.
challenges and problem of that, and then of course to talk a bit about the product and how we're approaching things. So skin cancer is more common than all other cancers combined in the U.S. There's about 5.5 million diagnosed every year. People often think of melanoma as the deadly one, which certainly it is. The mortality rate is higher than all others. It's actually the number one cancer killer of young women. But melanoma itself, which is relatively rare compared to basal cell carcinoma and squamous cell carcinoma, is actually expected to be the second most common cancer by 2040. So melanoma, which can be quite deadly, is also relatively common and increasing quickly in incidence. And squamous cell carcinoma, even though your chance of dying from having squamous cells is relatively low, because there's so many more squamous cell carcinomas diagnosed every year. Actually, it depends which study you read, but there's roughly as many, perhaps even more deaths from squamous cell carcinoma a year than melanoma. So that one in particular is also a big issue. There's about 1.5 million. So in short, major problem, tons of these cancers out there. Almost everyone that I know and meet and talk about our work may not have a direct story, but knows my friend or my uncle. There's almost or at least they can relate to the challenge of getting a dermatologist visit. Less than 20% of Americans report ever being screened for skin cancer ever in their life. So certainly nowhere close to keeping up with the annual visit or anything like that. So, however, I started off with all the negatives. The positives are that early detection of skin cancer, including melanoma, is effectively a cure. 99% of skin cancers that are diagnosed early, like many cancers, are easily treatable at that early stage. And the challenge and the frustration of skin cancer, but also the opportunity, is that you can literally see them right there on your skin. And so we really kind of now getting a DermaSensor, we really believe that the large opportunity comes from better equipping primary care physicians to better detect skin cancer, right? Dermatologists, by definition, are specialists on evaluating skin. They're quite effective with skin evaluation and care. Can you make specialists slightly better at what they do, sure, everyone can be a bit better at their job. But they're already quite effective at evaluating skin, right? So kind of our focus is that, can we up level the primary care physician? And keep in mind, assessing skin lesions and deciding should you go to a dermatologist or not, right? The patient that they're caring for is part of their scope of practice. It's very common in primary care. Often it's lesions that initially patients point at, right? Oh, my wife or husband kind of noticed this mole on my back, or, they come in for something else, upper respiratory tract or hair loss. There's some other condition. Like, by the way, what do you think about this mole? Or they have their shirt off and the doctor has the stethoscope out and they see something funky on the torso, right? So a lot of it happens in that way. And actually, skin conditions are the second most common conditions brought up in primary care, behind upper respiratory tract. So colds, coughs, etc. After that, it's skin conditions. So it's very common that skin is initially addressed in primary care, and often they're making that decision, should this patient go see a dermatologist or not? And that's really what our product is designed to be effective at helping PCPs make that triage decision. And so what we did, so now into the product, we spent, really it's a decade now. So I joined the company in mid 2016 to really kind of get things off the ground as the first, full-time team member and kind of co-founder and CEO, to miniaturize the 30-pound microwave size kind of prototype device that we built with Boston University. So of our few patents, a couple of those are issued from them. And to basically miniaturize it into the handheld 1 pound device that it is today. So we spent many more years and millions of dollars than I like to reflect on, kind of getting the device miniaturized. But that was kind of our core thesis, right? Which is to equip primary care providers whose average consult time is just like 10 minutes.
They've got to be able to do it efficiently, and it's got to be cost effective for them to invest in it.
Exactly right. Yeah. And that's what all of our advisors, to their credit, from day one have basically said, it has to be quick and easy to use for primary care. Otherwise, they're just not going to do it. Dermatologists, because they're skin specialists, have a bit more tolerance perhaps for, complex and or expensive systems. But primary care doctors, right, they have their stethoscope, their otoscope, ophthalmoscope, blood pressure monitor, cuff, and that's about it, right? They don't want to be buying $100,000 crazy, imaging systems.
No, it's got to be something efficient that the patient's already there, and if they can screen them appropriately and identify that pathway correctly, and then also maybe make an additional revenue stream from that, it's a win-win for everybody.
Exactly. And that's what for payers, right? If more skin cancers are detected in the primary care setting versus later in the dermatology setting, that's good for them. Perhaps, decreasing unnecessary referrals to dermatologists. But our main focus is really, can PCPs detect more skin cancer with use of our device to and help better prioritize the referral of these high-risk patients to dermatologists. And so the device uses a type of spectroscopy. It's called elastic scattering spectroscopy. So it's basically pulsing hundreds of wavelengths of light and measuring the reflectance at each wavelength of light through a microspectrometer that's in the device. And then an algorithm runs, and based on the training of the algorithm, like, what's malignant tissue, what's benign, the algorithm runs and basically gives a dichotomous, the outputs actually investigate further or monitor.
Okay.
So basically go see a dermatologist, or the device isn't recommending you need to right now, but keep monitoring the lesion, because obviously there was a reason why the device was used in the first place, right? There was some degree of suspicion.
Right.
So you should never just, the device isn't perfect, so you should never just ignore a lesion and say, hey, but also lesions can, become a fair number of melanomas start as benign nevi, right? So something that may be okay now, in a couple of years may not be.
So that, keep track of that and determine when the right time to act on it. And though that backlog in getting in to see the dermatologist, again, it's a win-win for everybody, because if you were able to do that and there were less referrals, those backlogs are pretty long, depending on where you're going to see that specialist. So it's a win for everybody in the system, particularly the patients, obviously.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And for us, we met with FDA about this a couple of years ago. When you get a positive device result, there's also a 1 to 10 score that
Hmm.
indicates how similar, like, okay, it's a positive result, investigate further. But, a lot of our work abroad, doctors were asking, okay, how positive though? Was it
Yeah,
something that the algorithm was just barely concerned about or thinks is very concerning? So that it's a 1 to 10 score that indicates the degree of spectral similarity to malignant lesions from the algorithm training set. And so, in our pivotal study showed that lesions with the higher score, I think of 8 to 10, was about, I think it was a 35-40% chance of being cancer.
okay.
So again, the device is not a definitive diagnostic, but that's, use the device from when you pick up the device, you have a result within a minute, and you can tell the patient, yeah, I was a little worried about it. And this device, based on the study results, actually, um, there's
It's not as concerning.
yeah, either not a concerning if it's a monitor result, but if it's a result with, one of those high numbers, based on the study, this is a 1 in 3 chance of being cancerous. That's certainly a good indicator that you as the patient, as the doctor, you should have that patient not only go to the dermatologist, perhaps you make a note in the, in the EMR or whatnot, that really be great if the patient got in a couple weeks. And we've talked to health systems with 8-month wait times.
That's amazing.
Melon could progress 2 stages. They go from a stage 2 to a stage 4 in that time. Um, so
No,
yeah,
that's incredible.
so I think that's really kind of been our focus. And we, there's not, it's tough, the technology side, and kind of having a device that quickly, non-invasively can improve physicians, highly trained physicians' performance in assessing a lesion isn't easy to do. And actually, there's not a single device on the market right now that's been FDA approved that uses any kind of image or optical, light-based technology to non-invasively assess a lesion. So, we hope to be the first one. We received FDA breakthrough status in 2021, and we're currently pending FDA review. So we hope to be the first one available, not only that uses any kind of light or image or to assess lesions, but also the only one that's available for use by PCPs.
No, that's huge. And there aren't too many clinical scenarios where, I mean, early detection is huge. And so again, better for the payers, another value add for the PCP to the benefit of the patient, and also improves that pathway and hopefully shortens the referral process to the specialist. And you have less patients going to see that specialist that didn't need to go because of your product. So I think that's incredible. I really appreciate you kind of walking through not only the target patient, but sort of how the product came about and how it benefits everybody in the ecosystem. Um, Cody, I love your background and as an entrepreneur with startups. You've been at a larger company like Genentech, and then went from startup to that, then back to startups, and your career progression and titles are pretty interesting as well. So now, as the CEO of DermaSensor, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your journey and maybe give a perspective on that larger company versus the entrepreneurial spirit, if you will.
Sure. Yeah, I had never heard the word entrepreneur or startup, in high school. I grew up in North Central Florida in a small college town called Gainesville. And yeah, went to Brown University undergrad. And, there was this entrepreneurship program. And I was like, well, I don't really know what that is. But as I kind of heard a bit more about it, freshman year, trying to figure out what you want to do, it was like, okay, that could be interesting. But started off in kind of the engineering track, which, life sciences and the kind of math and whatnot was always something of interest. But over time, kind of drifted to okay, well, ended up doing, so there's a technology track of the entrepreneurship program. So I ended up doing that, and my focus was bioengineering and also double majored in economics. But felt I didn't really know enough science. I'm like, okay, I kind of did like pre-med sort of, but I don't plan on going to med school. So ended up doing kind of a fifth year master's program, and did my thesis research at Stanford in a great bioengineering lab there, Professor Halshorn. And So really kind of learned, kind of hands-on what kind of top tier science is about, which was great for someone that didn't plan on being a scientist or engineer lifelong. And I knew that from, having worked with a couple other students to launch a crowdfunding nonprofit in undergrad, and worked at a venture capital fund part-time while I was in undergrad too. So I'm like, okay, I kind of like the sort of business side of new health technologies, right? Like, how do you develop them and launch them?
You
Not so
wanted to be
much
more
kind of,
involved in the strategy. You knew pretty early on you didn't want to be in the middle of the R&D or be a scientist.
yeah, and then again, feel like internships, when I tell kind of younger folks or friends or colleagues, kids, internships are as valuable for the process of elimination as they are for, kind of fun.
Absolutely.
And my first one, freshman summer, worked part-time in a genetic engineering laboratory. And it's like, okay, it's a kind of interesting academically, but like, I don't want to do this for the next 50 years. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what set me off on, okay, what about the more business and kind of entrepreneurial aspects of new health technologies? So
My
yeah, what was
my
it?
middle son, a lot of people in our family are in medical or clinical, and
Okay.
so that's kind of what he thought he wanted to do. Went and did a couple of different, shadowing events, and he's a pilot now. So that, to your point, worked out
Yeah,
really
same
well because it
concept.
wouldn't have been a good fit for him.
Well, it was funny. So while I was at Stanford, worked with a couple PhDs to launch a new health technology there. We went through the StartX accelerator. I think it was in its year 2 or 3. Now it's become a big kind of reputable accelerator, almost kind of the Y Combinator level, I would say. So it was interesting being there, a part of the early days. Did a licensing deal with Stanford, and so kind of got a good taste of that. And back to your question about kind of career steps and rationale. Um, I actually got some friends made fun of me for going to Genentech. They're like, you're passionate about startup stuff. You want to do that long term. Why are you going to work for the largest oncology pharmaceutical company in the world? Like, that doesn't. It has I think 80,000 employees at the time.
Right.
Like that doesn't really make sense. I was like, well, for pharma and medical device, like there's tons of regulations. Like the capital requirements are huge. One friend had just raised $20 million for his crowdfunding t-shirt company, and I was telling him, like, yeah, like I don't want to do my PhD or MD, so I'm kind of doing my like industry PhD.
Right.
Kind of getting that foundational knowledge and skill set, kind of in the top tier life
Well,
science company. And he made fun of me saying, yeah, I don't buy it because you just finished grad school, which that's 2 steps past what that lady Elizabeth Holmes is doing, and she's killing it, and she's changing the world. And this was 12 years ago. I don't know. And well, whatever. I'm not as smart and talented as her. More power to her. But I don't think I can pull that up. So anyway, we know how that ended. But
Well, right.
um,
We obviously know how that ended, but I think the other thing is too. I mean, I've been at two really large companies previously, but I think having that experience, if you just go into a startup right up from the right initially, or you're serial from that standpoint, you're going to learn things quicker if you stay in business, right? A lot of businesses don't make it, a lot of businesses fail, but I think having that reference to the large company atmosphere gives you a lot of insight into things that you like, things that you don't want, and they have great training. So there's a lot of positives you can take from that, which I think then help you when you get into the startup
yeah,
world. So, um,
100%. And that's what I'll recommend to younger folks is, like, you got to get a core competency in something, right? I
right,
think that's a challenge with joining startups straight out of school is, is it business analytics, which kind of, what my background was at Genentech, was always in kind of strategy and business development groups. So is it kind of like, business development and analytics kind of work? Is it sales? Is it recruiting? Right. I have a couple of friends that start off as recruiters that have, being the a C-level, C-level at a really successful tech company running the, HR department. And, there's like, whatever you're going to do, learn it well, get good at
right.
it. And, if you're passionate about it, stay in it and stick it out. And I think that's something else I've noticed that, actually, to continue on, I guess, with the Theranos example, I think folks that, and if you do join a startup, hopefully it's got a good culture and there's good leadership, et cetera. But I think a larger company, you kind of know to your point, you're going to get that good training, but also
Yeah.
you have good examples of how effective business people think and make decisions and weigh things. Because
Good,
I've seen a
better,
lot
best is
of,
what we used to always call it in product categories at McKesson, good, better, best. And
oh,
you
that's a good
you have
one.
to be able to identify the difference.
One, and I'd say for early stage startup, it's important to know where the line, because there's the kind of fail fast mantra, right, and fake it till you make it, and these things in the startup world.
Right.
But the issue is you need to know where the line is, right? I think a lot of folks that are physicians or especially engineers that they just hear like, oh, business people are really aggressive and kind of molding the truth and so like I'm going to do that. It's like, yeah, but if you were never in a company like that, you don't really have a feel for what's pushing the envelope versus blowing way
Way
by what's
past
appropriate.
it.
Yeah, like you can be kind of optimistic and positive about things, but it has to be based in truth. And I think some folks
Absolutely.
that haven't lived through some of those scenarios, especially at a good company that models where those lines are, they don't, they may, like I think Elizabeth Holmes would be an example, like they didn't maybe necessarily mean to blow, kind of way overstep the line because they didn't really know where the line was, perhaps in some cases. Not judging that situation specifically, but
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the key things you just said there was passion. And, I don't, at our company, my kids, it's all, find out what you're passionate about, because then in terms of how you grow, you study, you learn, and you become competent more, quickly, more efficiently.
mm-hmm,
It doesn't feel like work because you enjoy what you're doing. And I think that's really smart.
definitely.
And then it comes down to frame of reference, right? You don't know what you don't know. So who you surround yourself with and how you gather information and validate it's really important. Um, why don't we talk a little bit about some of the challenges relevant to getting funding as an entrepreneur and kind of your journey relevant to that at Dermasensors?
Sure. Kind of funding and I guess company development over the years. A big one for me is, we absolutely would not be where we are today, kind of without the support involvement of some really seasoned and successful, medical device entrepreneurs and executives. So specifically, Dr. Maurice Ferre and Chris Dewey. So they kind of, formed the company and sort of hired a couple of folks part time to kind of get the initial prototypes built and do some proof of concept studies. So it was kind of like NIH grant,
Okay.
but privately funded. You can think of it that way. So kind of got that early foundational work in place, not just with kind of the technology and things kind of pointed in the right direction, but also, the knowledge with what it takes to kind of bring a device like this to market. Because, when I joined the company, I was 27. And so, I had some of those experiences that I spoke about at Genentech and at Stanford, et cetera. But I definitely hadn't been through it successfully before. And
Right.
I didn't mention after Genentech, before DermaSensor, I felt so I did kind of done the concept stage a couple times and kind of got a minimal viable product MVP and initial sales. I'd done that twice in undergrad and grad school, but hadn't gone to that next step of raising millions of dollars and having departments and so I
Right.
joined a startup that had just raised their Series B. I think it was a $9 million Series B as the director of business development. And so, kind of saw that, ended up kind of major pivot or closing the doors were on the horizon. So that's when I was introduced to Maurice. So I've been there for a year, was introduced to Maurice, who's built two multi-billion-dollar medical device companies.
Right.
The current one's private, Inside Tech. His prior one, Mako Surgical, went public, and then a couple years later sold to Stryker for I think 1.6 billion.
Yeah. Amazing
Um,
entrepreneur,
yeah, amazing entrepreneur. And
innovator.
so a lot of the folks involved in that company have kind of spun off and started a few other companies. So DermaSensor, OrthoSensor, they kind of got very involved and are leading Inside Tech now, like I mentioned, raised I think 500-600 million for that. So it's been great kind of having him as, effectively my boss,
Great
technically
mentor.
kind of
You got an
co-founder.
incredible mentor.
Great mentor. And so to your point about funding and whatnot, having someone with that experience, that resume, kind of helping open some of those doors. But at the end of the day, it's if you're the one kind of full-time operating day to day, a lot of those key decisions and what's the strategy and the vision that investors are backing, folks like that can help open doors, which is absolutely important. And you need those people around you, whether they're key early investors or a co-founder or advisor. But at the end of the day, you got to walk through it. But
No,
yeah, I think, go ahead.
I was going to say absolutely. And you never want to be the smartest guy in the room. I know that's probably hard for you, not to be. You got a great background, but you're surrounded with incredible people, and I think that's an important lesson, right? We want to have people around us that can direct and mentor us. Everybody needs a mentor.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, but actually, it's funny, kind of high school, did well, was valedictorian, but then I got to Brown. I'm like, man, I'm working my butt off to get a B, and
Yeah,
what was
I
my
understand.
yeah multivariable engineering multivariable calculus for engineering majors freshman fall. I'm like, okay, I am not smart. Like now I understand what like actually smart is, but
Frame
it's
of
fine,
reference is important in so many different things, isn't it?
yeah, it's all relative, right? And yeah, no, I think on anything numbers analytics side can certainly hold my own kind of background in engineering economics, but it's also what kind of intelligence, right? I think
Yeah.
I have and continue to learn a lot from Maurice and others, kind of on the sales side. Not we're pre-commercial in the U.S., but really selling from a fundraising standpoint. I mean, so I think that's something that I continue to try to improve on. So that kind of EQ and there's multiple types of intelligence, right?
Oh, you're so right. And in my presentation, I use multiple resources and still from a lot of different people that are a lot smarter than me. But Mark Murphy, leadership IQ, hire for attitude. I mean, all the data. 11% of failed hires over a long period of time relevant to technical aptitude. All the rest of the reasons for poor hires, poor
Yeah.
emotional intelligence, not coachable, poor temperament. They're all more relevant to cultural fit. So,
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
lot more.
No, you're
Just being
absolutely right. And
smart
that's,
doesn't necessarily get it done.
yeah. Yeah. No, you're
Why,
right.
why
And
don't, as we finish up here, why don't you tell us kind of
sure.
what are the next steps for Derma Sensors, and what can our following kind of that want to follow as you guys grow, and what things look like?
Sure. So for us, a constant, I mentioned it a couple times, but kind of product development, first getting the device miniaturized and finalized, took, I think originally we were hoping a year, maybe 2 years, ended up being 3.5, to get it miniaturized and kind of design finalized for manufacturing. So now happy that we're kind of in the next phase, which is getting through the FDA. So we're under the submission's under review right now, which is great status to kind of finally be at. So
It's
we
exciting.
announced, yeah, we announced I think June last year the successful completion of the first pivotal studies of any kind for a PCP skin cancer detection device for the U.S. So that's kind of big milestone, and fortunately we raised a solid financing, so 10 million kind of in the late 2021, early 2022, actually just a couple months, kind of closed out a couple months before COVID hit. Oh, sorry. Before that was the Series A closed before COVID hit.
Okay.
For that 10 million, actually, a lot of that was right before I'd say the financing environment really took a turn for the worse. But anyway, so that money will last us through getting FDA approval, and so that for us is kind of the key focus now
Okay.
is, providing, addressing any FDA questions, concerns, etc. Hopefully the 4 studies and 7,000 pages that we submitted will be sufficient in terms of clinical evidence. I sincerely hope so. But yeah, and you're kind of preparing for, understanding the market in terms, is value based, is fee for service, cash pay, kind of where is this going to fit
Understand
the
the
best?
reimbursement and getting ready for hopefully a exciting commercial launch in the near future.
Exactly. Yeah. And kind of like I touched on in the beginning, the more experienced you are in evaluating skin lesions, arguably the less benefit the device will have. Right. So trying to understand, so early practice for physicians, for example, we think this could really be a big benefit. But, doctors that are looking at skin all day, every day, they're already likely pretty expert. Right. So may
Right.
not benefit as much from a tool like this.
But people that are new out of practice, and for those that don't look at it all the time, it compresses that timeline and ability to bring value to the patient.
Yeah, and we've heard from some physicians. So, internists a lot of the time are in a hospital setting, so skin is not first on foremost on their radar. So for them, even though it's like, yeah, sometimes lesions come up, but I just always refer. Unless they really look concerning, I tell them they're okay, right? It's such kind of I'd say sort of, there's no clear sort of guidelines and consensus on how PCPs assess lesions and make referral
Right.
decisions, right? And so we think a tool like this can help improve that. But also the challenge in primary care is if they're making referrals, which generally PCPs are making referral decisions, some do biopsies, especially in more rural areas, there's no feedback loop, right? When you
Yeah.
refer a lesion, maybe the patient comes back in 6 months. It's like, oh, that mole you were worried about, the dermatologist wasn't. And you're the physician, you have a couple thousand patient panel. You saw that, you know what I mean? It's hard to, it's like, well,
Right.
which lesion? The patient, oh, I don't remember. Or maybe they did a biopsy and then the lesion's gone, so you can't see it anymore. So unless you're taking a picture and you're kind of getting the result back from the dermatologist or the biopsy results if they did a biopsy, you don't really get better, right? It's hard to improve because there's no feedback loop. So
Right.
even if they are evaluating skin a lot, it's hard to really sort of up level their performance because they're not getting the true diagnosis most of the time.
No, it's super exciting. I'm really excited to have you on here. It's going to be fun to watch you guys. Hopefully, all the data comes back from the FDA extremely positive, and then you guys have a really successful commercial launch because the value that it's going to bring not just to patients but to the healthcare system, and from an efficiency standpoint, I think it's significant. Are you presenting next week at LSI?
I am, yeah. I'll be presenting and also on a panel. I think it's on Thursday.
Okay,
So yeah,
awesome.
excited to be there, and yeah, no, but we're really grateful to start catching the attention of some folks like yourself and LSI, and we were announced as a winner of the Edison Award a few weeks ago. I think we
Yeah,
find
that's
out in
right.
a month.
Congratulations. That's exciting.
Thank
My
you.
information.
Yeah, we find out in a month. Kind of which is it, gold, silver, bronze, but it'll be one of them. And of course from the FDA themselves, right, with breakthrough designation. And so yeah, no, I think everyone is kind of agreeing, has agreed for some time, it's a very important problem, an area to help improve.
Absolutely.
And we spent a long time, a lot of work developing a tool that we think will make a big impact, and like you said, hopefully FDA agrees. We'll find out soon.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. I look forward to seeing you next week, and we'll be there. Appreciate Scott Pantel and the great format that LSI puts together to bring together the innovators and those that fund the innovation that's benefiting patient population. So I'll see you out there. Look forward to your update, and look forward to watching Dermasensors continue to grow under your leadership and bring great value to the marketplace. So thanks a lot, Cody, for being on.
Thanks so much for having me. Bye bye.
Awesome.
For the video recording of this podcast, along with additional resources, make sure to find us on the web at ShurigSolutions.com or follow us on social media and LinkedIn at Shurig Solutions.